the dirt road becomes muddy. So both ways was not nice. But in 1978, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. The doctors gave her only 6 months to live. And the doctors told my father not to be nasty to her, not to say anything to upset her. Just go home and prepare for her death. So for 6 months, it was like my mother's died. I remember watching her in the house. She would sit opposite us. And I'd look at her face, and any minute, her face would swell up. And I'd run out the house, waiting for the news that she's dead. And it was a horrible time. Going to school, you go with worry. And I used to walk to school. And we'd always go past this hospital where my mom was admitted. And you can imagine the depression and the no lunch at school and no mom when you come home. It was pretty dark time in our family. And also knowing that in 6 months' time, she will die. But I remember one Sunday afternoon, some Christians came home. And my parents were not going to church at that time. They were just unbelievers. These Christians came home and said this one thing. My mother was lying on the bed, waiting for death. And the Christian said this: Jesus can heal you. And that was a foreign language in my home. Because before that, it was all about death and fear and losing mom. So the next week, my parents went to church. They said, come to church and our pastor will pray for you. So the following week, they went to church. And of course, the pastor prayed. And as they came back home, I remember, still as a young kid, I would have been about 10 years of age. I remember my mother coming close to me. And I was playing soccer with my other brothers. And I looked at my mother's face. And for the first time after months and weeks, I saw my mother happy. And I stopped playing soccer. And I looked at her and I said this in my heart: there must be something good in church. And I realized later the reason why she was happy was because she went to church and gave her life to Jesus. Amen. She got born again. Now she was still carrying cancer in her body, but because she received Christ, she became born again and she received life, eternal life. And what was in her was showing in her face. And my mother was always in and out of hospital. And one day, my mother prayed this prayer in the hospital bed. She said, God, if you heal me, I will give you one of my sons to preach the gospel. I was 10 years of age, and as I went to my high school, I started my high school. At the age of 14, my mother took me to church and said, son, today I will take you to church, and today is the day I will dedicate you to God. And I remember going into this church. This is a church in our hometown, a small church, wooden benches. My mother sat next to me, and my pastor sat opposite us. And my mother said to the pastor, Pastor Daniel, and he's passed on now, he died at a very good old age. He said, Pastor, today I'm here to give you my son. As from today, Alan will be your son. Can you please help him, teach him, raise him, tell him how to preach, show him the scriptures. At the age of 14, she said that. And I remember while I sat with my mom, while she was saying this to my pastor, in Sunday school, they taught us this story about Hannah and Samuel. If you know the story of Hannah and Samuel. And I said, this is so similar to Samuel and Hannah's story. And as my mother was talking to my pastor, or our pastor, I said this prayer in my heart. At the age of 14, I said, God, this is very similar to Hannah giving Samuel to God. I said, when I grow up and when I get married, can you please give me my first baby, female, and I will call her Hannah, and I will remember this day. Now, before going there, let me say this. So 6 months came to pass. My mother was still alive, and my pastor kept praying for my mom. and the doctors were using the medication, doing their best, because I want to say this, that the doctors are God's gift to society. God has blessed them with talents and abilities, and there are sometimes when it's beyond them, and that's when God comes in. And after 6 months, my mother was still alive. And the doctor said to my mom, he said, whatever you're doing, keep doing, because it's working. And what was working was she was going to church, praying, and believers praying for her, and she was growing in God. 2 years came by, and she was still alive. And that time, she was giving me to God. And the doctor said, look, it is cancer, and cancers have got roots to it. And whether it's 4 years, 5 years, it will come back again. And by this time, the doctors opened the hospital doors for my mom to go and pray for all the sick patients. So she was there praying for all other people that were sick in the hospital. Let's cut this story short here. Then it was 10 years. And she didn't have cancer. In 1996, the doctors called my mom into the hospital and said, we will close your folder today, and we're going to declare you cancer free. And there is no sign of cancer in her body. Now my mother is still alive today, and I am going to Fiji next Saturday to see her. I get to see her every 18 months, and so she's alive, and she's here to also enjoy a grandbaby. So she'll be seeing a grandbaby next Saturday, and I'm looking forward to our trip. But let me say this. So I came to Bible college here in Australia at the age of 20, going to 21. And I remember that day in the church where I said, God, when I get married, please give me my first baby as a female. So I went back to Fiji, pastored a church, and I met my wife in 1992. And she falls pregnant, and lo and behold, we get our first child. And I was saying, God, let it be a female. And she comes forth, and guess what? She's a female. And we have called her Hannah, and Hannah today is a mother also. And I remember not long ago, this is just going back a year ago or 14 months ago. Oh, no, my grandbaby is 1. So let's say 18 months ago. She went to the hospital and she had all these complications that women get, with the ovaries, and she can't fall pregnant, and she was getting some negative reports that you won't fall pregnant. And I said, God, but Hannah in the Bible did, but then it dawned on me that Hannah in the Bible was barren. So I remember one time I was in a prayer meeting, and my daughter makes this phone call to me. Says, Dad, I've got the bad news. It looks like I won't be falling pregnant. Inside a prayer meeting, I'm supposed to be teaching faith, but I had this massive headache of fear and worry, thinking the world has fallen apart for my daughter and for us. We'll never have a grandchild. But in that prayer meeting, we started to pray, and many Christians prayed, the church prayed, the believers prayed. And then I said to my daughter, Hannah, I said, Hannah, I said, when I called you Hannah, I said, I didn't realize it was a package deal. That Hannah in the Bible was barren. And I said, look, but when she gave birth to one of the best in all of Israel. And his name was Samuel. And Samuel became the #1 prophet. And I said, Hannah, God will open your womb. God will bless you with a baby, and you will have a perfect child. Few months later, she goes to the hospital, she does a check, and the doctor says, guess what? You are pregnant. Yay. And today I have a grandbaby who is about 12 months old. So, and her name is Amber. Yeah. And she is a delight, and she is a beautiful baby.